Hi, I'm Nicole Glenn, co-host of the LLC podcast. It's an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring women who are making a real difference in logistics and supply chain. With the LLC podcast, you will hear inspirational stories, both personal and professional challenges our guest overcame, how their backgrounds helped shape who they are today, and how they empower others and give back to their communities and often the world. Joining me today is Ellen Voie, founder and CEO of Women in Trucking, a global organization whose mission is to help women become aware of career opportunities in transportation, and then to mentor and assist them to become more successful in their roles. Thanks to Ellen's leadership, WIT has grown to 5,400 corporate members and individuals in 10 countries. So thanks for being here, Ellen. Let's dive right in. How are you today?
I'm doing great. And actually, we're up to 6,500 members now. So we've been growing at quite a fast clip.
Yeah. Everyone's kind of seeing the word, it's getting spread, and social media channels are really helping that too. I know that I've seen a lot of people start being more interested and wanting to join. So that's awesome. Congratulations on that. But I wanted to dive right into some questions, and you have such an interesting background. Like, I'm so excited to have you here. It's actually weird for me to be on this side in comparison to you. So I'm like going to utilize this time to learn more about you. But I just wanted to touch base in regards to sharing more with our listeners on like where you grew up and just that little bit of insight on you and your past.
Well, that's going back quite a ways, but I actually grew up in a very small town of about 800 in central Wisconsin. And everybody was blonde haired, blue eyed Norwegian, and people would speak Norwegian on the streets. It was a very much a very close knit community. We had all Lutheran churches. If you were Catholic, you had to go to the next town over because it was a very Lutheran community.
Yeah.
My dad, my grandpa, my dad, and my uncles owned the funeral home. So growing up, I was the undertaker's daughter. But growing up in a small town, there's positives and negatives. But the positive is it really does take a village to raise a child. And everyone knew, like, I remember stopping on my way to school. We walked to school, and I was looking at these little plastic sunglasses at the Rexall drugstore, and the drugstore proprietor goes, "Get going, school starts in 12 minutes." I mean, it was like everybody knew what you were doing. But and I was the second oldest of 5 children, so very a good sized family in a small town. But I had a very idyllic childhood, so I'm grateful for that.
That is awesome. My husband grew up in a very close, small community, and people love the fact of knowing everybody. And I'm sure as a parent, I'm sure your parents were grateful that they had someone that would always have eyes on you, right? And report things, right, to you, to them about you. So I get that. So early influencers and mentors in your life.
I'm going to use my mom because my mom always believed that I could do anything. And now this is back in the 70s. This is a long time ago. And so I wanted to take shop class. I really was more of a tomboy. So I said, "Mom, I don't want to take home economics. You can teach me how to cook and clean, but I want to take shop class." And so we had to lobby the school board. And I took industrial arts, and I learned drafting and welding. I learned how to make bookcases, woodworking, things like that. I built a gun rack for my dad. And the automotive class was my favorite because my older brother didn't know anything about automotive or engines. And so when I wanted to use the family station wagon, I would go disconnect the distributor cap so that he could start the car.
Yeah.
and then when I wanted to use it, I would just put the spark plug back in and drive off. And he never could understand why the car always started for me and not for him. So there's some good skills you can learn.
I was going to say, I wish I would have learned that trick, because when I got grounded, the car that I actually purchased myself, my parents would do that to me. So they were like, "Yeah, you're riding the bus, kid. Get going. You're riding the bus." I didn't know that trick. I didn't take automotive class. I did do the woodwork shop, though. I loved it. I was just talking about that with my husband the other day. Yeah.
Well, so those skills led me, I got a job drafting, doing material handling equipment at a steel fabricating plant. So I was drawing cantilever racks, pallets, things like that. And then they came to me one day and said, we'd like to move you into the traffic department and we'll pay for you to go to school. And so many women I talked to in the trucking industry didn't start out by wanting to be in the trucking industry, but ended up here, and then we stayed. So I was only 19 years old, and they sent me to school for traffic and transportation management. I became the assistant traffic manager, and then when my boss left, I was the traffic manager, and I was responsible for all the steel coming in, all the products going out. I had to quote rates, and I was all of 20 years old. And we had 3 of our own trucks. So it was wonderful. I could read tariffs and audit freight bills and do driver qualification files. And so that skill has propelled me throughout my career because I knew the regulatory side of it.
Yeah, I was going to say that that's such a good background to have in logistics because then you have the fleet experience too, which I think, especially being on the shipper side, a lot of shippers don't get that opportunity to actually have drivers, even if it's 3, and what goes in onto running a fleet and understanding all of that. So that's awesome to have that background. So I did.
I have to share something with you. So I ended up marrying a truck driver, and we had a small fleet, 3 of our own trucks. And it's funny because people will say, "Oh, did you get interested in trucking because of your husband?" And I said, "No, actually, I was already in trucking." So, after I started my family for 18 years, I did consulting. And so I did licensing and permitting while I raised I have a son and a daughter. And during that time, so we had 3 trucks, and then I also completed my bachelor's and then my master's in journalism and master's in communication. And my master's thesis is called The Complex Identities of Women Married to Professional Drivers. And so my research was about when you're married to a truck driver and he's gone, and he would be gone for 6 weeks at a time, then your mom and your dad, and you have to be very independent and self-sufficient. And then when he comes home, you're suddenly part of a couple, and you're co-parenting, and it's 2 different worlds, and it's not an easy life.
Right. It can be very disruptive to the routines and the regular flow of things. One of my good friends, her dad used to drive for Yellow for many years. And she would say that. She would say exactly what you just said. She's like, when my dad would come home, it would like change everything on what we were doing and create like this kind of disruption to the house, So you got to live that firsthand and research that. Yeah. Yeah. So you've been in trucking really most of your professional career in the industry, I should say. What led you to create Women in Trucking? Like what made that idea go poof, I should do that? And I have 2 questions and 1 question. And then what's your vision for the organization now in the next 5 years? So we'll start with the first one on why you decided to do this.
So after I did consulting, I went to work for a small nonprofit called Trucker Buddy International, and that was a pen pal program for truck drivers in elementary classes. And I worked there for 6 years. I was the executive director, and I got recruited by Schneider National. They said, well, you have this knowledge, the family side of things and the regulatory side of things. We'd like you to come and be. I was manager of recruiting and retention programs. And so that was corporate level initiatives. And they said, figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups. And one of the groups was women. They said, how do we, and this is, kudos to Schneider for being, a forward thinker back in 2006 to say, how do we focus on bringing more women in as drivers? So when I started doing my research, I thought, well, women are looking for safety. Women are looking for equipment that's safe and a company that looks out for their safety. And Nicole, at the same time, I was working on my pilot's license, and I belonged to a women's aviation group. And so I thought, why isn't there an organization for women in the trucking industry? And so I put together a board of directors and got attorneys to fill out all the paperwork. And that's how Women in Trucking was born in March of 2007. It was really, we modeled it. In fact, I modeled a lot of it after Women in Aviation International. And they know that. So, I really felt that we needed to bring more women into the trucking industry at all levels. And as the aviation organization represents everyone from pilots to technicians to air traffic controllers to, executives. So does women in trucking. We represent drivers and technicians and dispatchers and safety directors and women who own trucking and logistics companies, such as you, Nicole.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about it. Even going to the conferences, you're meeting every person in every industry that's touching logistics. And I think we miss that because we're in our own little bubbles, right? Our own little spaces. And so to get that collaboration and connection is just fantastic with women in trucking. I loved attending conferences last year.
So your question about moving forward, we recently started chapters. So I want to see growth at a more local and regional level. We launched our driver ambassador program. It's a tractor trailer that's branded. It's got a hands-on learning environment in there, along with a simulator. And it talks about, do you have the DNA to be a driver, or should you be a technician, or what other jobs are there? It's also got myth busters in there. I want to see that get out more. I'd like to see it going to schools as well as trade shows. Our board of directors meets once a year to do a 2-day strategic planning session, and we're doing that in June. And so I work for a board of directors, and under their guidance, we determine, what do we want to do in the next 1, 2, or 5 years? Who do we want to be known as? And the biggest goal that I personally have for women in trucking, I want us to be the resource. I want the industry to come to us. I want the government to come to us and say, how can we do this better? Or what's the data on this? Or what information do we need? And I believe we're getting there. I do get invited to the White House. I serve on the Motor Carrier Safety Advisory Committee, also served on the Entry-Level Driver Training Advisory Committee. And so I do get a voice at the national level. But we also want to be the voice for the industry as well on gender diversity.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful with that. So that's one of the questions that I do have is females in trucking. I see article after article that's like, not necessarily the cons, right? But it's more of why it's a struggle, why it's so hard, what we should be changing for women. And I think there should be more boasting about what are the pros? Like, what are the great things about being a female in the trucking industry? And with you talking and being a part, I would love to hear your insight in regard to what's so great about it for females that they would want to join it.
Well, first of all, women make the same as men. If they're a driver, they're paid by the mile or the hour or the load. There's no pay disparity. And that, to me, is a huge, we should be shouting that from the rooftops. There's no 77 cents on the dollar because you're female. And actually, our research has shown that women often outperform men. So that means they're actually making more money. So the money is the first thing. The second thing is think about an 80,000 pound vehicle, and people have this this misconception that you have to be big and burly or mechanically minded or a man to operate that equipment. And when I see some 95-pound woman hopping out of a tractor trailer, my heart just like, yes. Because there's so much technology in the trucks these days. I mean, we have power steering, power brakes, we have anti-collision, anti-rollover. I mean, there's so much technology in the trucks that make it not only easier to operate, but safer. So that's one of the reasons we have to get our message out, to let people know that this isn't your grandpa's trucking industry. This is a whole different world out there, and it's a safer place. It's a better place, and you can make a good middle-class income.
Yeah. And what I've seen too over the perception of the trucking industry, I think everyone thinks that you're just gone for 2 weeks, right? That's always been what you even see in a commercial, or dad's on the road, mom's on the road, and they're just missing. And with what we're doing with supply chain and distribution, we're opening up so many more regional concepts, more local facilities that really you don't have to be on the road for days upon days or weeks upon weeks. And there's so many companies that are hiring individuals to fill those different spots, whether it's, like I said, local or regional, and you're home for the day. And so I think,
waste management. I mean, and Republic Services, hauling trash. Women just don't think about, they don't look at a trash truck or recycling truck and think, well, I can do that. But we are pushing so hard because the technology in those vehicles, it's like a joystick. It's like playing a game.
Yeah.
And also you could deliver parts, you could deliver milk, you could, fuel. I mean, there's jobs where you're just delivering fuel in the city. There's so many jobs, and intermodal, and going to the ports. There's so many jobs where you can put your kids on the bus in the morning and be home later in the afternoon and go to their ball games and still drive a truck.
Right, right. And I think we need to boast that too, because it just has this misconception that you'll miss out on life, and you don't have to anymore at all, at all. So I wanted to hop into this next question because we spoke in an advanced conversation prior to the podcast, and you said something that really stuck out to me because I'm a business founder too, right? And a lot of the things that you were saying, even when we first started talking today, I'm like, I can relate to that. But you threw out this concept of founder syndrome, right? We hear imposter syndrome. And I wanted to share this because it resonates with people who are starting companies to have these ideas. And then your infamous, statements. Can you tell the audience more about this and why this is so common amongst entrepreneurs?
So entrepreneurs see how they want the world to be. Entrepreneurs either have a product or a service, but we always have a vision for how we want to change the world. So we see that vision, but we don't necessarily know how we're going to get there. And that's where the comes in. And so when I tell my staff, well, okay, this is what success looks like. This is what I want this project to be. And like how to get there. And they look at me like, we don't really know how to get there.
Yeah.
And so being a founder, you have, first of all, you own it. I mean, I don't own Women in Trucking because it's a nonprofit and I set it up that way. But really, as the founder, I'm still the face. And so and I report to a board of directors. So legally, the board of directors sets my salary. They do the hiring and firing of the CEO. So that's really hard. It was hard for my dad to understand. He's like, well, I don't get this. You founded it, but you report to them. Well, as founder, I feel as if I'm close to the day-to-day operations. And so I always feel like, well, why don't they listen to me? But then again, you bring in a board of directors and you bring in advisors so that you get their perspective. So I have to be very careful. There's a fine line of how much do I say, well, I've got this? And then how much do I say, I need your help? And as founders, it's hard to say, I need your help.
For sure. For sure. And that's why that resonated with me yesterday, because I'm like, that is exactly what I go through as a founder. They're looking for all of the answers. And that's always the mission, is to take what we decide that we want to do and make it come into fruition. And the detail part is so hard. And I think other founders put that onus on themselves. And that's why I wanted to showcase that it's a human quality. Everybody listening, if you're a founder and you're an entrepreneur, that is very relatable. It's the weight hits your shoulder so hard. But again, what Ellen just said is, ask for that help at the same time, while you're trying to move the company forward. So that's why I wanted to share that, because it's just, I went, yeah, every day. So I wanted to ask too, we know your mission, but at the same time, what are your big passion projects that you're working on?
Well, safety is a huge priority. And a lot of our female drivers, not that safety isn't a priority for men, but it's a higher priority for women because personal safety comes into play. And so when you tell women things like, well, you're going to sleep in a truck at a truck stop, that might cause some women to not enter this industry. So how do we make the industry safer? And there's 3 areas of safety. The first is how well maintained is the equipment. So we tell women, make sure that when you go to a carrier, find out how old their equipment is and what their maintenance policies are, because being broken down on the side of the road is not safe. So that's the first area. The second area is, where are they delivering? So if you're delivering maybe fuel, you're going to a truck stop or whatever, or milk, you're going to a farmer's. But if you're delivering dry freight or maybe refrigerated, you're going to warehouses. Are they lit up? Do they have security guards? Is it a bad part of town? Because that's not safe when you send someone into an area where there might be activity that's that's not safe.
Right.
And then the third area is make sure that the company you drive for really does believe that you are the captain of your ship. And companies will use that term. And so if let's say there's a tornado or a snowstorm or even a protest, when there were protests, if someone said, well, I don't want to go in, I don't want to deliver to that area because to me that's unsafe because they have a protest. What's the company's response? Is it, hey, this is trucking, deal with it? Or does the company say, we respect your safety feelings, and we will respect that and either have someone else deliver it or shift the load to a later time or whatever. But safety is a huge priority. And so we work with truck stops on safety and security and amenities. We also work with the truck cab manufacturers. I have an alarm system in my home, and if somebody were to break in when I'm not here, they would call me, then they would call someone else, and then they would call the cops within 2 minutes. And why can't we have that on a truck?
For sure.
If the driver's eating, at a truck stop or taking a shower, or even if the driver's sleeping in the back of the cab, why shouldn't they be notified? Why shouldn't the alarms go off and lights flash so that, they're safer? We need to make this industry safer. And then one other area that's a passion of mine is our training policies. If a female trainee wants a female trainer, she should have the right to ask for a female trainer. And right now, because of lawsuits that have happened to carriers that have had a same gender training policy, that doesn't happen. And so carriers have to be gender blind. And I think that's a travesty. And when I say to executives, so Nicole, do you have any daughters?
I do. I have one. She's 17.
17. So let's say she turns 23 and she says, hey, Mom, I just finished training and I'm so excited. I've got a job in transportation and I'm going to start my job this coming week, but I'm feeling a little uncomfortable because I have to share a motel room with my boss. What would your response be?
I would say that that's crazy. I'd be like,
And what do we
why?
do? We put them in
Yeah, I get that. So when you have these programs and you're trying to educate women, are these usually women who are just entering the industry, and like what tools do you give them? Is it like classes? What does that look like?
We do. We always do self-defense training, and you've been at our conference.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
so
Yeah.
Debbie Gardner with the Survive Institute. So the other thing is we have an informal mentoring program where people can match themselves together, but we started a new formal mentoring program, and it's called Lead Her Trucking. And we take 10 to 12 women, and it's a 10-month commitment. It's done online, but they meet once a month with the whole group, and every month someone will come in and talk to them, like maybe finances or health or safety. And then they meet one-on-one with their mentor. So we take women who have been in the industry a year or less and match them with someone who's been in the industry for a number of years. And it's been very powerful. And we know that in the last group of about 10, 3 of them were on the verge of leaving the industry, and we kept them. So we know that they don't know where to go for answers, and they don't know who to talk to. So we provide that, and we're expanding that. We want to bring in a lot more groups. We call them pods, the Lead Her Trucking pods. And so we can reach more women. And one other tool that we've given in the industry to anyone, driver, male or female, is we have a new driver microsite on our website. And if you just click on the word driver, it's so much information, like how to choose a school, how to choose a carrier, how to stay safe. There's videos on there. There's so much information free to anyone. We want to empower people coming into the industry, especially drivers who might have a lot of questions.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So what is that website again? I know we're going to talk about it at the end, but what is that website for people who are listening right now to check out for that?
It's womenintrucking.org. And again, you just click on, first of all, click on the word join.
Yeah, right. And that's the one thing that I do want to touch base on is Women in Trucking is a not-for-profit organization. So it is based upon memberships, donations. I've seen you guys do some wonderful sponsorship things. So of course they need you guys to constantly contribute to this so that way we can keep these types of programs even growing further down the line. So, I mean,
and I'm glad you said that, Nicole, because we are totally supported by the industry. We don't get government dollars. We're a dues professional, a trade professional organization, and so we're dues based. So all the money comes from the industry to support our mission. So thank you for saying that.
Yes, for sure. And we're going to share that link too, because we definitely want people to contribute to that. So I'm going over time because there's so much good stuff that you have to share. So I do want to jump into this next question, which is, what's one life lesson that you did or overcame that's helped you propel this career that you've established?
Well, we talked before this, and I think I shared a different story, but I'm changing my answer. And when I told you earlier that my mom told me I could do anything, so when I was 19 years old, 18 years old, my mom was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease and passed away 8 months later. And so she didn't know anything about what I've become or what I've done. But I feel like she's always over my shoulder saying, you've got this, you can do this. She believed in me. And so, she probably would have wondered, what are you doing in the trucking industry, Ellen? But I guess when you lose your mom when you're 19 years old, it really changes your perspective on life. I always thought that I'd live a short life because you just have this in your head when you lose a parent at a young age. And so I figured I better move fast and I better get things done before a certain age because I didn't think I'd live as long as I have already. So it was like, fast forward, I gotta get things done and make things happen because life is too short.
Yeah. And I have a father going through terminal cancer right now too. And so I'm almost 40, but at the same time, that has definitely created that same type of concept for me. He's in his 60s. And so it's almost like a bittersweet gift we get, right? So they make you want to live your life like so fulfilled. And so it's one of those things, at least for myself, that's inspiring to see. So I did want to ask this too. If you could teach young women coming into this industry one thing, what would that be?
So you need a thick skin. You really need a thick skin. Don't let comments get to you because you're going to hear them. And the other thing is, you have to prove yourself in this industry. When you're in a male populated environment, they are all watching you, especially if you're the only woman in the room because you're representing all your sisters out there. So they're going to watch you. Once you prove yourself and you prove that you are walking the walk, you will get the respect. And I know that it might take some time, but like for a driver, when a woman backs up to a loading dock, all the guys are watching her to see if she can do it. But once she proves that she can do it, they accept her. So my advice is have a thick skin, but once you've proven yourself, you will be one of the guys.
It is. It really is. It's growing up in that industry will tell you that you have to just almost pretend like to turn a blind eye, right? Where if you see all those people, don't even acknowledge it, just back it in and go.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So one last question for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. But what's the best advice that you've ever got? And I like this spin on the question too, or the best advice that you got that you didn't take that you want to share with our listeners?
The best advice I ever got, and I use this every day, is assume good intent. And the reason I say that is when something happens, like someone cuts you off at an intersection or someone does something that you think was offensive to you, you have to sit back and think, was it really about me? Because a lot of times it wasn't. And so I'll give you an example. I had a board member who set up a meeting and didn't include me. And I was very offended. I just thought, well, why wouldn't you include me if you're talking about women in trucking? And then a friend of mine said, Ellen, assume good intent. He's taking the time out to go meet with these people to talk about your organization. Assume good intent. And I looked at it that way and I thought, wow, I need to thank him. And so it really changes your perspective. It wasn't about me. It was about him doing a good thing and I took it wrong. I thought it was about me. So assume good intent is such great advice because you'll look at the world differently.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we are at the end of our show, Ellen. Thank you so much for sharing your personal and your career journey with us. I just want you to just throw out there how people can get in touch with you and how they can, again, learn more about women in trucking.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you, Nicole. You didn't even mention that you are the Women in Trucking Distinguished
This is
Woman
not about me.
in logistics. So I want to thank you for your involvement and your support for women in trucking as well. And we are so proud of you. And thank you for having me on your podcast. But they can get a hold of us at womenintrucking.org. We also have a scholarship foundation, which is the womenintruckingfoundation.org. So I would encourage people to please look at the scholarship foundation accepts donations. Women in Trucking is a membership-based organization. So I would say if you support our mission to get more women in the supply chain industry, then please join.
One last thing before I let you go. Can you just touch base on the dates of Accelerate so people understand where it's going to be and when they should start to look out for the registration buttons?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. Our Accelerate Conference and Expo is in Dallas, Texas at the Hilton Anatole, November, I think it's 13th through 15th, and you can already register now. Even the hotel rooms are already set up for reservations. So go to womenintrucking.org and just click on that Accelerate tab.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, and everybody stay tuned for more inspiring stories from LLC. Thank you.